Whether on the field, on the court, or on the balance beam, there's more to winning than the final score. Hi, I'm Patrick Manning of Black Desert Resort. We recognize the effort it takes to succeed. That's why we are proud to partner with the Utah Checkdown, the podcast that tells you the story before the game, then gives you a recap of what happened when it's all over. The grit, the glory, and the disappointments. Join us for stories of Utah's finest athletes and coaches. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong, happy to be back for another week. Man, it's been a rough go for you Utah fans trying to deal with all the problems that have been going on up at the University of Utah. I know it hasn't been a great time, and we're gonna chat about it. We're gonna break this down, recap the Utah loss, and kind of all of the ramifications that presented. So. Before we do that, I want to tell you about our partners, Black Desert, who are helping with the KSL.com Beyond the Game video series. The videos highlight various athletes and give an inside look into their life. Recently, we talked with former Utah offensive lineman Garrett Bowles about how a second chance at life allowed him to pay it forward to troubled youth. You can check out that video and many others on KSL.com. Black Desert is a new resort destination in St. George that features a championship Tom Weiskopf 19-hole golf course that combines a private club feel with destination resort golf, amid lava fields and 360-degree vistas. Black Desert is changing entertainment in southern Utah, and they're just beginning. Black Desert, where remarkable is within reach, home of the Black Desert Championship PGA Tour. All right, well, let's jump right into this because it's been an eventful last 48 hours or so. Utah obviously loses their game to TCU 13-7. The defense, this is a TCU team that managed a ton of points this year, or at least in the 30s, and Utah held them to 13 points. Pretty remarkable job by the defense, and we can get into that in a bit, but did a good job, and yet Utah's offense couldn't do anything. They weren't able to manufacture enough offense. They were barely even threatening to get past midfield. Even when they did get past midfield, it was called back because of a penalty or different things. So this was a situation where it didn't work, right? And this common theme has kind of been there for the last few weeks. The offense can't move the ball. It's not schemed very well, and there's been a lot of frustrations all around. Before there was always conversations about, okay, the red zone or different things, and you could kind of pinpoint it at that and kind of use that as the scapegoat and say, okay, here's an asset or an aspect of the game that isn't working, and it kind of masks what was going on. The problem is it was just the overall offense, right? It just from top to bottom, there just hasn't been a lot of effectiveness. And, you go from being in that Baylor game where everybody's looking at this thinking, okay, Utah might beat Baylor by 40 by halftime. And, Cam Rising goes out and suddenly the entire tone of the season changed. There was optimism because he was going to come back and things were going to change, and it just has never materialized. There's been, moments of brightness and things where things have been able to go well for Utah. But by and large, this is a team that just hasn't been able to get it going on the offensive side of the ball. And there's numerous reasons. There's not one exact reason for that, and we've pinpointed some of these, over the weeks as we've talked about this. But it's just an offense all around that just isn't working. And it's an offense that Kyle Whittingham, after the end of the game, he credited the defense with what they were able to do. A pretty impressive performance. It's not quite to that same elite level that we're used to seeing, but it's pretty close. I mean, this is a team that held them to 13 points. They made Josh Hoover, put up a ton of yards, but not really get anything out of it, which is saying something. But this is just a situation where the offense wasn't moving the ball, and Kyle said there was going to be a lot of conversations and a lot of look in on what was going on over the next 24 to 48 hours. In less than 24 hours into that, introspection for the Utah football program, Utah announced that Andy Ludwig was stepping down. This is, we talked to Kyle Whittingham today, and he said this was on Andy's own volition. He decided that, they needed a different voice in that room. And so Andy decided to step away and kind of hang up his coaching shoes, or whatever you want to call those, to be able to step aside and let the offense kind of do what they need to in the way that they needed to. And that meant without his voice. Now, in the coaching world, that is, Kyle was pretty adamant that it was Andy's choice, and it was, I'm sure it was one of those situations where, you're faced with, do you want to be fired or do you want to resign type situation. That's just the nature of this, right? You want him to be able to go out on his own terms and be able to feel like he can get the dignity and the support that he can get. But at the end of the day, this was a situation where Utah just needed to change, and unfortunately for these offensive coordinators, and defensive coordinators, it's usually them that gets the axe first, right? They're the ones that they're the first line of defense in terms of who needs to be let go or move on to be able to get to where it needs to go. Kyle Whittingham's not at risk of losing his job, right? Like, we're not at that level. Kyle Whittingham's legacy is fine. It's intact. And obviously it's getting to the end of it. And, by all means, it's probably very well could be his last season. He hasn't said that. He's still talking as if he's coaching beyond this season. But I think just the logistics of it and everything make that a tough choice for him. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be the offensive coordinator. It's always going to be the defensive coordinator that takes the fall beforehand, right? And the reality is it came down to having an offensive coordinator that schemed his entire offense to one player being Cam Rising, where you go into the season knowing that you have him available. He's able to do everything that Andy wants him to do, right? Those last 2 years where Cam was able to play in 21 and 22, you saw the full complement of that playbook, right? As it was mentioned, I think it was from Kyle, a couple of weeks ago, Andy's playbook is incredibly tough to learn, but once you do it, there's so much flexibility into it. And when Andy feels comfortable and that play caller on the field, or the signal caller on the field, is able to kind of match that, it's kind of a match made in heaven, right? Like, Andy can get guys to where they need to be and make them shine. He made Tyler Huntley look like a Heisman caliber type player. This is where he was able to go. The problem is, when those things break down, there wasn't a lot of creativity, right? You have a quarterback who's a freshman quarterback that's putting a ton of pressure on him to be able to learn a system that was still, for much of the season, tailored around Cam Rising. You don't want to change up anything. You don't want to kind of manipulate that in a way and say, okay, this is all the Isaac Wilson show now, and so we're going to tailor it all to that. That's really tough for a team to be able to kind of switch those gears. It's similar, right? So I don't want to say it's some thing that can't be done, but at the same time, the way that this offense was structured, it was structured around Cam Rising. And Andy Ludwig has always been about the players and trying to build towards their strengths. The problem is he just wasn't able to get it in a way that fit with what Isaac Wilson is doing. And so you get a situation where you're out on the field and it becomes incredibly predictable because there's not a lot of creativity there. Even the creative things have been seen before. They're already on tape. They're things that anybody watching that game knows what's going to happen. There's several tweets that I saw during the game about fans looking at it to say, okay, this is going to be a run up this. It's going to be that. It's going to this. The fact that, an untrained eye like us, and I'm lumping myself in there because I'm clearly not in that realm where I can, understand what is fully going on the field. If we can understand what this play is going to be, you have to know that these opposing coaches who are watching film, these opposing players who are watching film religiously or should be watching it religiously, they're going to know exactly what this is. And so You're seeing that, right? They're putting pressure on Isaac because they want to blitz him. They want to put that pressure on him to make sure that he feels that heat. And they're not even doing it with 7 guys. They're just manufacturing it in a way that just puts a lot of pressure in their pressure points, that interior pressure, and we can get into that offensive line in a minute. But they're doing it in a way that forces him out of that. Utah hasn't been throwing it in the middle of the field much. They're using a lot of out routes or stuff on the sidelines or different things that they're trying to get there. And so all you have to do is essentially lock it up there, and you've been fine, right? And teams have figured that out. Utah's offense hasn't been hard to figure out. Like I said, if my untrained eye can get it, if fans who aren't, in the playbook every single day, if they can understand what's going to happen, you're too vanilla, right? You're too uncreative. You're not getting it. And the thing is with Andy Ludwig's system, like a lot of people will talk about him playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. There is some truth to that, right? He is very good at establishing certain patterns in games to be able to help a team kind of relax in some areas, right? So the defense will say, okay, they're going to run it up the A gap 4 times in a row, throughout these 2-3 series, whatever it may be. And then what happens is they start relaxing a little bit, and then suddenly he can, utilize what he needs to be able to get there. The problem is they were never able to get into those situations because that offense just couldn't move the ball. Too quickly, that offensive line was getting blown up, and Isaac Wilson was, either not making the right read, or he was being told to make reads that are very difficult for him, that are only getting 2 to 3 yards when they needed to pick up 7. It just wasn't a situation that was beneficial for Isaac Wilson. It wasn't beneficial for the offense. And then when those things start compounding on each other, you have players dropping passes. You have players that aren't maybe running as crisp of routes, and they're not trying to get that separation that they need to. They're not doing what they need to. It's just becomes this whole effect on the offense, and it becomes different. And it becomes difficult because now you're basically running yourself into a wall instead of trying to do things to set yourself up for future success. That future success never happens, and you end up scoring 7 points in a game where the opposing team only scored 13 on your home field, no less. That becomes a very difficult challenge to be able to say, yeah, everything's okay. Kyle Whittingham in his post-game press conference, in a very cheekily way, he said, everything is okay with this offense unless you like this, and listed off everything that is important to be able to run an effective offense. And he just said, other than that, everything's okay. Clearly not everything was okay. Nothing about that offense is okay. And, there's a lot of people that want to point fingers, and there's a lot of fingers to be pointed at, right? There's not one thing that I mentioned. Andy Ludwig is going to take a brunt of that, and for large part is probably, the biggest reason, I would say. He wasn't scheming a system that worked toward, Isaac Wilson's strengths. And as a freshman quarterback, giving him multiple reads or multiple checkdowns or different things to be able to confuse him in a situation where that defense is going to be pressuring you relentlessly, it becomes a challenge for him, right? It's just difficult for him to do that. Now, on that same vein, Isaac, there's things that he has to improve on. We get it. Like, that's a freshman quarterback. That's not like somehow he's so far behind. And I know there's these 2 storylines that have kind of been painted out of these last few weeks. It's that either Andy Ludwig is terrible at his job and he needed to be fired, or Isaac Wilson is, and he needs to be benched for Brandon Rose, the guy that's been in the system for 3 years and still hasn't been able to sniff the field. Somehow he's supposed to be the guy. Maybe it's Sam Heward. He hasn't been in the system that long. Like, the reality is it's all of it. Right? And I'm not saying that Isaac has been terrible. Like, I actually think he's been much better than fans are willing to admit. I think there's things that they've put him in, positions that they've put him in that aren't advantageous to him or the offense. It's not his fault that, the first 2 downs are being asked to run, up the A gap, and there's no creativity there. It's all this inside zone stuff that nothing is changing. The offensive line is getting blown up in the interior, and then they're putting him in a 3rd down situation, and he's supposed to make something out of that. But instead of working in the middle of the field or working in these shorter routes, and I'm not saying like 2-3 yards, I'm saying maybe more intermediate, they're trying to go for that deep play. And yeah, you're going to get that pass where, he connects with Money Parks on the 71-yard touchdown. That's great. That shows the depth and talent that Isaac can project, but that's a shot that you're going to take once, two, maybe three times a game. It's just not the type of play that you have to rest your offense on. And so what happened is you're putting Isaac in a situation where clearly it's already a failure type of a situation to begin with, and you're expecting him to produce this at a high level, the level that you're expecting Cam Rising to do. And I understand that the coaching staff understands that he's not that player, but at the same time, get him comfortable. Find ways to get him comfortable. They used some motion with Brant Keithy, but the thing is they used it in a way that didn't really work. He gets it, he runs just barely off the edge, and it's blown up. And then they try to do it again. Like there's a lot of things that can be there, but you've got to have some creativity around it. Continue to show some things, right? If you want to continue to do the inside zone and you want to continue to do some fun stuff, that's great, but you've got to be able to have, checks. Give him an opportunity to be able to check out of it or to be able to do different things to be able to help him eliminate mistakes. You've got to be able to make his time easier. And the more comfortable you can make him early on, the easier it's going to be. We saw in that Arizona game that Isaac has the talent. You can see that he can move the ball. And I would say that Arizona's defense is probably the best defense that they've faced out of the last 3 games in terms of kind of those losses. And yet they moved the ball on them with more ease and with more comfortability than any of these other games. He was able to do it. He can do it. If you give him some comfort and you give him some confidence and be able to scheme things up well for him, he can do it. The problem there was they didn't finish in the red zone, and we've berated that one to pieces, and so we're not going to get into that. Few Utah fans, you didn't get into the red zone, so you don't even have to worry about that week. So little things, I guess, right? But this is a situation where you've got to be able to help your players, right? You can sit here and say, okay, Isaac Wilson has the entire playbook at his disposal. And I do believe that, but at the same time, you've got to do it in a way that helps him. Spread it out a little bit. Do different things to be able to make him so he feels comfortable. Give him multiple options. You've got so much talent on that offensive side of the ball where, you're coming into the season where you're saying, arguably, this could be Utah's most talented offense, and yet you continue to do the same things. It's Mekhi Bernard, and, speaking of Mekhi Bernard, who has been phenomenal for Utah, he continues to find ways to push forward, continually finding ways to be able to make this offense go. It's him, and then it's Brant Keithy, it's maybe Money Parks and Dorian Singer. I mean, Dorian Singer has to get more touches, right? He's got to be able to get that ball more, and you're not scheming it up in a way to help him. Okay, so all of that has happened, right? Like, we get it. Like, that's where it's been. And you can blame put your blame on anybody that you want. And I understand people are still not fully sold on Isaac Wilson. And I'm not saying you have to be, but now you've got a situation where you took out your offensive coordinator, or he took himself out as they want you to say. And they've now replaced him with Mike Badjikian. This is a guy he came in as an offensive analyst over the summer, just before summer, actually. And because of new NCAA rules, they allow him to basically be the QB coach. And so he's been sitting there hand in hand with Isaac Wilson this entire time. Isaac has developed a great relationship with him. They have a good relationship where they watch film together a ton. There's a good relationship there. Well, this is something where Mike is being able to help him and transition that. He's now been named the interim offensive coordinator. And Kyle Whittingham has said that this is his job, right? That he's not going to share a title with anybody. In the past, Jim Harding has shared some run play, passing, opportunities. At the end of the day, it was always Andy calling the plays, but there's insight there. My guess is there's still going to be insight there from Jim Harding. He's got an understanding of it. He understands what needs to happen. He understands that personnel better than Mike Badjikian can do it. I keep saying Mike's name wrong, and for some reason I can't get it wrong. But Mike Badjikian, I don't know. I'm not getting it right now. My words aren't coming out. I can type it and I can do everything, and I understand how it's pronounced. But for some reason my words aren't saying it. So we're gonna call him Mike today. It's just one of those days. I'm sorry. But we'll get to speak to him tonight as well, and be able to get some insight from him and kind of what he wants to do. But he utilizes more of an RPO system, wants to spread things out a little bit, which honestly I think fits Isaac's strength a little bit more. It probably resembles a little bit more of what he was running at Corner Canyon, which if you want to go circular, see, I can't even speak today, circular route. This is really great for a podcast. I'm sorry for all you listening today, but, Corner Canyon has stolen some elements from Utah. So it's kind of this circular situation of, where is it coming from? At the same time, you want to do things to be able to make Isaac feel comfortable. You want him to be able to have that confidence to be able to know that he can go out on the field and do what he needs to. At the end of the day, like was said, this becomes a new voice. That we don't know if that voice is going to be any better or any worse. It's just going to be something new. And if you've lost your team, and I'm not saying that Utah has fully, lost its players and everything, but when you're getting into this, you've got to be able to have a new voice to be able to help this move forward. And so with Mike, you're able to have that voice. You're able to have a different kind of skill set and maybe kind of a different mindset in how you call plays. There's going to still be some similarities, right? There's still going to be things where, as he's done in the past, he's going to do things where he's going to be repetitive. He's going to put it in there, and he's going to try to get those defenses once again to kind of relax and kind of make things comfortable. Then you utilize a play action or something like that to be able to all of a sudden change it up, and you can beat the defenses. And so don't expect suddenly for a new offensive coordinator who's in an interim role, and he has years of experience, to completely change this offense. It's still going to be very much so Utah's playbook, right? They're still going to have the same plays, the same vernaculars, the same types of stuff, but it's all in how he's able to game plan. It's all in how he's able to manufacture that is going to potentially be different. Like I said, it could all change, and suddenly Utah feels like it's been freed and they can run what they need to. I have a tendency to believe it's not just going to suddenly be this magic pill that Utah's offense has figured out and everything's going to work. Because once again, like I said, Andy was not the full problem. But at the same time, it has the potential where you have guys that feel comfortable, where they can feel like maybe they can get a shot, and maybe you kind of tear it down to the studs to some respects and say, okay, we've got the playbook, we've got the blueprints, we know exactly what we need to do, but here's how we're going to attack it, and here's what we're going to kind of put out on the field. It's built around Isaac now, and we're going to build to his skill set. We're going to build towards Dorian Singer. We're going to build towards Mekhi Bernard, Brant Keithy, and then you can add in all these other guys. A guy that should be on the field is Landon King, in my opinion, right? I don't see what's happening on the field in practice, but he was able to produce last year. You've got Carson Ryan. You've got Damian Alford, who, it was said that Andy Ludwig's offense was a little too difficult for him to learn right now, and that becomes a challenge. Does he get to see the field? Because now maybe he feels like he can contribute in the way that a new offensive coordinator is able to do that. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say all of a sudden, the sky is blue and everything's going to change. But at the same time, maybe there's potential for different personnel that allows you to be able to move the ball. You're not just keying in on three different guys. I mean, if you're a defense right now, we've got to pay attention to Mekhi Bernard, we got to pay attention to Brant Keithy, and we got to pay attention to Dorian Singer. Oh, and you do have to pay attention to Money Parks as well. But at the same time, if you're keying in on the same guys and you see them on the field, that's pretty I don't want to say it's easy, right? Because it's not. Like, football is still a very difficult thing, but it's easier to be able to know what's going to happen. It's the same thing when you put Dijon Stanley out on the field. You knew he was probably going to be either he's going to run it off the edge, or you're going to try to utilize that wheel route that works so effectively. You've got to do things to build off of that, right? Put him in a situation or a system that looks like he's going to run that wheel route. Do a play action pass, do something building upon that to change it up so the defense still has to respect the wheel route. They see him run out off of that. They have to respect him. That safety comes towards him, and suddenly you tack on a crossing route or something somewhere else. I mean, there's different things that you can do to get creative, and then if they decide to not respect that, then you do have the wheel route open, right? You have him respect down the field, and he's shown that he can do it. There's just so many things that you can build off of with that. And so I don't think Utah has to fully change their offensive identity, but at the same time, there's things that they can do to be able to make the system go much better. Now, with that being said, we're going to see what this looks like this week, right? Utah travels to Houston. It's going to, I think a lot of people assume this is going to be an easy task because Houston has not been great. This is a Houston team, though, that did beat TCU. So, I mean, there's always that. You do need an offense that's going to continue to gel and get better and improve, but it's not going to be easy, right? It's not just some magic finger that you can snap and everything's going to be good. But I think this sets up well for Utah in the sense of what they can do to finish the season. Their goals that they set up for themselves are essentially done for, right? Like the chances of you getting into a Big 12 title game are all but lost. Like, I mean, absolute chaos would have to happen for Utah to even sniff a chance. And even then, I don't even think that would happen. I mean, it would take BYU and Iowa State losing 3 times. It would take like just pure madness to be able to get there. And I'm not ruling that out. This conference has been wild. This season has been wild. But at the same time, that's not there, right? And so at this point, you're playing for respect. You're playing for a bowl game. And I understand the bowl importance isn't super great anymore. You get a lot of opt-outs. But at the same time, you're looking at guys like a Dorian Singer or a Brant Keithy. They're looking to the future. And if they don't get anything out on tape, that becomes a challenge for them. So they're going to still be playing hard, right? You can't quit on your team. You can't quit on your season. There's always ways you can explain that to the NFL scouts or to the GMs when you're talking to them in the future and say this is what happened and they see that. But if you quit on your team, it becomes much more of a challenge in the NFL. And so you've got guys that are going to continue to play hard, right? That's the thing. If anything, though, this allows Utah, this is me speaking, I'm not saying this is what they're saying, but it allows you to play more free, right? It allows you to go in there and say, like, we honestly have nothing to lose. I mean, what do? Lose another game? So be it. Like, I think everybody at this point would expect you to probably, I don't want to say lose every game, but I think they wouldn't be surprised if you lost more games based on how things have gone, right? You scored 7 points at home against a team that scored 13. Like, that's about as bottom as you can get against a team that is probably one of the worst defenses in the Big 12, and you couldn't move the ball. Okay, so you're not going to be favored in many games, right? Like, it is what it is. So if you can go into this Houston game, you can kind of get out some of those wrinkles. You can get out some of those things that you're going to learn with a new play caller. That helps you. You go into a bye week. Now you have 2 full weeks to prepare for BYU. Oh, by the way, that's an emotional game, and it's going to be crazy. But you get 2 weeks, and you come at the perfect time where you can kind of install somewhat his mark on an offense in a way that you get a real game. You get Houston, so you can now use that as tape, and now you get a whole extra week to be able to prepare for your rival, who is playing phenomenal, right? Like, there's a lot going well for BYU. I know a lot of people want to say, is it luck? Is it not? At the end of the day, they're still winning games. I think this, Oklahoma State exposed some things from BYU, but that's, we're not going to get into that. At the same time, that's going to be an emotional situation, and teams are going to want to beat each other, right? Obviously. But it comes at a good time. If they can play this well, Utah has an opportunity to, kind of change the tone of the season. You leave the year on a high. Yes, it's not where it needs to be, but at the same time, you can kind of, make lemonade out of lemons, or whatever you want to say with that analogy. But this becomes, in some ways, a freeing opportunity for the team, right? They can just go out there, have fun. At the end of the day, you got to have fun. And right now, it hasn't been fun for Utah. They've been really frustrated with how things are going. You're seeing that wearing on the players. They need to find that comfort and that relief. And if you can provide that, even if, you're scoring, let's say 28 points, I think that would be a real freeing moment, considering that Utah's managed 36 points in the last 3 weeks or 3 games. So anything to get this team moving is going to be beneficial. Now, I said not everything has gone well, right? Obviously, as we've talked about with Isaac, he's still holding on to the ball too long, right? He can't hold on to the ball that long. He's got to be able to try to get it out in a much quicker way. At the same time, they've got to develop that offense in a way that gives him the ability to do that. Right now, they're developing some pretty deep routes, right? They're trying to get the long ball and trying to make it so that they can pick up bigger plays because he's got the arm. But at the same time, he has to hold on to the ball too long, and then he has to think about it, and then he's getting pressured, and he's taking sacks or he's taking QB hits. All of these things factor into that, and so then he's left scrambling or left to make decisions in a rushed situation. Find ways where he can get that ball out. The typical in the NFL, especially, around 2 seconds, right? I don't know what the average would be in college, but I mean anywhere between 2 to 3 seconds, you've got to get that ball out, right? The faster you do that, the easier it is to move. You can see what it does for those quarterbacks that do get the ball out quickly. You can see that offensive line doesn't have to protect as long. They also don't have to worry about the blitzing as much. I mean, you still have to protect, right? Like I get that. But you give yourself so much more of an ability to succeed if you can get those things done. And so it's working with Isaac to be able to make that read quickly, but also setting himself up so that he can have that, right? Whether it's crossing routes or out routes or slant route, whatever, pretty basic routes. These don't even have to be pretty elaborate, but do whatever you can to make sure that he feels comfortable. You can get him those quick things, then you can develop it, right? Then that defense is going to relax a little bit. Then you can do some things in the run game. Then you can do some things in the passing game. It's all kind of needing to be benefited from having a game that is suited to Isaac. So yes, he has to improve on those things, right? Like that's it. But at the same time, this, a year ago he was playing for Corner Canyon, looking to go to the state championship for 6A. This is a kid that is still growing. He's got a lot of confidence. He's got a lot of maturity in the sense that he's taking ownership for this stuff. He apologized to the defense at the end of the day. That is good. I think those are all good characteristics, and obviously his performance on the field has to improve, but you've got to be able to do more to help him. Now, with that help has to come on the offensive line. Last week was a bit of a mess, right? This is a team that ranked near the bottom in run defense, and Utah managed, I think it was 68 yards in the run game. Mekhi Bernard had 55 of those yards. I mean, this was a situation where they just didn't get anything going. And a lot of that was the pressure that they had, and a lot of that was, everything there. But at the same time, the grades for these players just weren't great. You were seeing some of the offensive linemen being switched out. I'm not going to name names. I don't think it's fair necessarily to name a lot of these names, and some people may disagree with that. Just safe to say it just wasn't cutting it, right? And there was players that needed to be moved, players that had to get out of there, and that's the nature of it. You have two. What am I going to say? Like there's two avenues here where you have some of those linemen that were absolutely great in pass blocking, right? Especially those tackles. So you've got Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fanu. They actually graded very well in pass blocking. Some of the highest graded players of the week on offense. They're doing great work. The outside has been fine for Utah for most of the year. That has actually been the great opportunity for Utah. It's that interior pressure that's becoming much more difficult. Now, there's two different things here. This game, that interior pressure, you've got 4 of those guys that are grading really high in pass blocking. It's really solid. Everything was going well. One of those guys is actually Falcon Kamatule, who came in to relieve one of the players to be able to move in there. He actually had the highest pass blocking grade of the week, did really well. Right? So you have that potential where you can get these guys come in here and can do well in the passing game, right? They're giving enough. Their offensive grades aren't fully complete, but pass blocking, they're doing a decent job. Now there's others on that side of it where it's absolutely abysmal, right? It's not great. One of the players graded out as a 3.7. I've never honestly seen that before. It just didn't work, right? At the end of the day, those were only 7 snaps. So it was a quick outing, but you weren't getting that same consistency throughout the game, and being able to have that, you're having to change things. The real issue here came in the run block. At least this week. It's been kind of flip-flopping to some extent in the offensive line. The run block just was kind of mid. There wasn't really any great solid grades. It just really, I mean, Dallin Bentley had your highest run blocking grade, and he's been great for Utah. He's one of those unheralded players that, whether it be blocking or whether it's him out running routes, he's pretty much open every single time, and they could utilize a lot of what he's able to do, and that should be an area where Isaac looks to, assuming that is part of the game plan. But he's done well. Outside of him and his 74.8 grade in run blocking, everything is below that, right? Like it's just kind of mid. It's not great. It's not a great system for Utah, for a team that relies so heavily on establishing the run and trying to use that to build upon anything else. It just hasn't been effective. And some of that is how Utah is running the ball. As I mentioned, you're seeing a lot of the same inside zone stuff that it's not creative. And so there's some elements there that play into that. On the other end, it's not helping Utah advance what it needs to, right? When Isaac needs to be able to advance the ball, you've got to have an effective run game to be able to make sure that he can do what he needs to. If not, then they know that they can do certain things on obvious passing plays, and Utah has very obvious passing plays outside of maybe a select few. It becomes a very difficult challenge for him to get to what he needs to because they know where they're going, right? They know that we can put pressure every single time, or in this situation, we'll simulate pressure but then drop back into coverage, and then Isaac has nowhere to go. It's been very easy that way. But at the same time, the run blocking has to improve, and it just hasn't been there this year. There's not much you can necessarily do, but at the same time, this is going to be the emphasis of the game where they have to figure things out. And if they can get that, they're going to be fine. Now, fortunately for them, Mekhi Bernard has been a great asset for the team. He's been able to do a lot and be able to get a lot of yards. He's not grading out the highest, but he's still able to do what he needs to on the field for the most part, right? He's had 4 games this year where he's rushed for over 100 yards. He's been able to be effective. With that being said, he can't be the only one. And outside of the last 2 games, he's been the only one on offense that's really done anything, or at least in a way that is meaningful to move the ball. This becomes a challenge for Utah because coming into the season, there was a lot of talk about this running back room. They had a lot of depth. There was a lot of talent. You had Mekhi Bernard. You had Jalen Glover. You had Dijon Stanley. You've got Charlie Vincent. He's a walk-on player, but he's been really solid in what he's able to do coming into the season. You've got talent. Essentially, you got Mike Mitchell. I forgot to mention Mike Mitchell, another freshman or redshirt freshman. You've got a lot of talent in that room and a lot of optimism. And sure, like the coaching staff still wanted to see more, and more of that was related to experience. But then it's just been Mekhi Bernard or bust. There was a moment, honestly, on Saturday when he got hurt and he had to go to the medical tent that I don't know where Utah would have gone. Lately it's been kind of more of a Charlie Vincent where they've been trotting him out on the field. But there really hasn't been an answer. It's been him or bust. And you get Mike Mitchell in there occasionally, and I've mentioned it. Mike Mitchell has been banged up a little bit, but he hasn't played a ton of reps this year. And we're starting to see him likely become a little bit more healthy in there. Kyle Whittingham talked about Jalen Glover today, where Mike Mitchell has just beat him out, he said. It's gotten to that point where that's what Kyle's saying. He's beating him out. But at the end of the day, Mike Mitchell had 3 total snaps on Saturday. That's it. Charlie Vincent had 5. So, even Dijon Stanley had 5 snaps. And so 3 of those were passing snaps, and, they're not getting the ball a ton. But there hasn't been an answer. There hasn't been a guy that's been able to step up and do that. And I don't necessarily fault any one of those players. Obviously, they have to produce in practice and they have to produce on the field. But at the same time, there hasn't been any development in the offensive strategy to be able to allow that. At the same time, Jalen Glover, even if he has passed up, there's been more that's going on there that he's not getting to see the field. For whatever reason, they don't want to put him on the field. And, that's up for them. There's conversations that I've had with people, and I'm not gonna share that here. And it's a difficult situation, right? And I think you have a player that can be effective in that game, and Utah's not utilizing him. I don't know if that is an Andy Ludwig situation at this point in terms of now you can utilize him or not. I don't think so based on the conversations that I've had, but you want to be able to have more assets available to you. And, you're benefiting because Mekhi Bernard hasn't been injured, but that's not always going to be the case, right? All it takes is that one snap like he had on Saturday, and suddenly the game changes. And that's been your most effective asset of the game. And you don't have anything more. Charlie Vincent, coming into the season, there was a lot of conversation about him because people hear walk-on and immediately just think he's a terrible player. I don't know why that's the case. I don't know why people assume that walk-on means you're not good. There's been proven time and time again that that's not the case. But for whatever reason, because you're not on scholarship, and all that's going to change in the lingo moving forward soon anyway with the NCAA settlements and different things. But for whatever reason, people think that just means he's not good. And then they see also the time where he bobbled the snap at Arizona State, and that's going to put another bad impression on him. Sure, you do have to perform on the field, but at the end of the day, he is one of the guys out there that is doing that. At the same time, I think most expect other players to be able to perform at a higher level. If they're on scholarship, they should perform at a higher level, right? And some of that, like I said, is the play calling because it hasn't developed in a way where they can see the field. But you've got to be able to get more of these players involved in the game. And it's just not happening right now. The snaps are limited. It is all going to Mekhi Bernard. He's on the field for a majority of the time. I think there was 61 total plays run for Utah, and Mekhi Bernard was on the field for 54 of those. He's just taking the bulk of those reps, right? He's taking the abuse of being in the pass blocking. He's being in there for the run. This is just not an easy situation, and you've got to be able to find somebody to help. That's somebody that can come in there and do an effective job with that. I don't know. I'm not going to assume that I have the answers for that one. I think this is a very specialized room that is of difficulty that only they can really get that fixed. But at the same time, there needs to be more, right? If this is where maybe Andy was kind of just utilizing one player, that's the issue. I don't know what it is to that, but you've got to find more guys that can develop on the field. They can, be effective. But you're getting to the point in the season where guys that aren't playing, it becomes much easier to kind of check out, right? You'll go through the motions, you'll do the things that you need to, but it may not be as crisp as at the beginning of the season where you were expecting. Outside of that, this is a team that still has everything in front of them in terms of what they can do and be successful at, right? Like, I'm not saying that they can get to the Big 12 championship. I'm not saying that they can get into the college football playoffs, but they still have everything in front of them to make this a respectable season. You can still go 9-3 in the regular season. That's going to be much more difficult. You do have BYU, you do have Iowa State, you do have to go on the road to UCF. These aren't going to be easy games. You're even going on the road in Colorado, and Colorado has been much improved, and that's a team that you can't just overlook anymore. This becomes a very difficult stretch for Utah, right? And you're losing games that are winnable, and if you can't get things corrected, that becomes a big challenge. And so you've got to find some answers, right? And the defense is going to do their job. We're looking at the defense this last week, and I think a lot of people are kind of down on the defense this year. And the hard part is they're doing this all injured. They have a ton of guys that aren't, either experienced or are out of the game. The veteran guys are out of the game because they've been injured. Kyle Whittingham made a joke today that I don't think there's been a game where any of his captains have been on the field at the same time. That first game, obviously, they were all there. But outside of that, he's been right. There's been an injury to at least one of the captains where they haven't finished out a game or done different things. Utah does get Correne Reed back last week, and that was a world of improvement. You saw kind of his communication and what he's able to do. He's still not fully healthy, but he wants to be out on the field. You had Keanu Tanavasa, who was back on the field, and he was creating havoc all single night. Like, he was doing very well. Was putting a lot of pressure on them. Like I said, this was a TCU team that averaged 30-something points per game, held them to 13 points. There were moments, especially that first drive, where TCU looked like they were just going to go guns a-blazing and put up a ton of points. But Utah did really well to stop that. They were able to be effective on third down. This is a TCU team that ranks one of the best in the country on third downs, and Utah held them to 4 of 17. Like, that's a remarkable number considering where TCU was at. I don't have the stat in front of me. Let me see if I can find it. But TCU was converting at something like a 80% or 90% on third downs. Let's see, where is it? Third downs, 48%. Sorry, I was thinking red zone. My bad. 48%, which was still 17th in the country. I mean, this is a team that was converting almost on every single try that they were getting, or at least half of the tries that they were getting, and Utah held them, as I said, 4 of 17. That's a remarkable number. There were moments where, that first drive of the game, they were picking up a first down on every touch of the ball, right? They get down into the red zone and suddenly it stops. You held a team to 13 points. That's a remarkable job. So, you have to take all of that into consideration when you look at this Utah team. This Utah team did really well on defense. Teo Johnson led the team in defensive grades, had a great day, tackled well, all-around defense. His coverage was great, only allowed a 39.6 NFL passer rating on any throws thrown his way. I mean, this was a good effort from Utah, right? It's still not to that level that Utah's talked about in terms of these elite Utah defenses, but that just shows kind of the high benchmark that Utah fans have, or that Utah has for itself on this defense when that becomes the case. This is a defense that is going to continue to help you win games. But the point is, you've got to be able to score those points. Kyle will talk about all the time that, if Utah is only able to score 7 points, the defense needs to only allow 6. Now, I understand what he's saying because it's a full team effort. But at the same time, if you only give up 13 points, 1 touchdown and 2 field goals, you should win a game. If your team can't do that, I'm sorry. I mean, when you make Iowa look like a good team on offense, you've had some problems. So this is a defense that is going to continue to do well. They're on the field, able to put in that pressure, and they still manage to do what they need to. This is a team that was very pass heavy and what they did. And Utah got beat late with some runs. They put their running back in, or kind of slot receiver, in wildcat situations, and were able to be effective there. But for the most part, I mean, this is a defense that did a pretty solid job. So we'll see how this develops. I don't know that we have many more answers coming from this, but we'll get to talk to the new OC tonight. Hopefully I'll remember how to say his name, or my words will just allow themselves to come out the right way. I know how to say his name, but for whatever reason, it's not coming out today. So we all have those days, right? We have those days. So hopefully by Thursday we can get to that point where I can say his name. But that's going to be it for today. We'll come back and preview this Houston team. That it's easy to sit here and say that Houston hasn't been very good, and they haven't. But this Utah team hasn't been very good, and they're a much more put together team. And if Utah can kind of maximize what it can do on offense and utilize the players that it has, different play calling, whatever that may be, there is a chance for a turnaround and for a team to look much better. But anything that we say on these things is always going to be a challenge, and I'm curious to see how it works out. But we'll hit you up again this week and talk about that and see where we can go from there. So with that, signing out today, and we'll chat with you guys again later this week.